open road.
The next stop on my Italy Interrail trip was to Italy's Cinque Terre. Cinque Terre, literally 5 lands, is a famous collection of picturesque cliffside villages on the Italian Riviera in northern Italy. The mission? Hike the trail between all 5 villages. Now, we were staying in a hostel in the 3rd village along, called Cornelia. It was our most expensive hostel of the trip, so we were only staying there for 2 nights. Therefore, we had to make the most of our time there, and hike this way one day, and this way the next day. There's this blue trail that connects all 5 villages. However, the easy trail that connects Cornelia to Manarola and Manarola to Riomaggiore is almost always closed due to rockfall and landslides. There is, however, an alternative steeper green route option. But this does turn an easy 3-kilometre walk with 100 metres of climb into a 9-kilometre hike with 600 metres of climb. But we were up for the challenge and decided to trek this route on the afternoon we arrived. But not before we had to trudge up all these stairs from the train station to even reach our hostel. With a bit of time to spare before we could check in, we went down a steep path to see the sea. There was no beach in Cornelia, and it was definitely the quietest village of the 5, but it was such a peaceful, quaint little place to stay. But with no time to lose, we were soon on our hike southwards.
Found your feet, but now they only run to meet a hope that's hanging loosely was your cry.
We arrived in the village of Riomaggiore, just in time to soak up the evening sun.
For I swell up with rage, let me sing to old age.
Disappointed that there was no proper swimming beach, we were still determined to have a dip in the sea after all that hiking in the hot sun. This was perhaps a little stupid, as the waves were very big and there were big rocks. So believe me when I say we looked nowhere near as cool as this surfer dude, and I was glad to get out largely unscathed. We had an amazing dinner in this village, and took the train back to have an early night, to gear up for our next day of hiking. This time the Blue Trail was open, but this was still no easy undertaking with 7.5 kilometres of walking on hilly terrain. Nevertheless, we started early to avoid the heat and walked with pace. Now, I really enjoy wearing my hiking sandals, but I was unaware until seeing the sign on the trail that all open-toed shoes are in fact banned on the Cinque Terre trails, as they don't want to be rescuing stupid tourists wearing flip-flops who underestimated the hike. Fortunately, I did not get fined or need rescuing.
You were only back home 'cause stole a heart.
We had a short break in the 4th village of Vernazza, but still got to the northmost village of Monterosso by lunchtime. We arrived! This place did have a proper beach, so luckily we didn't need to risk our lives again here, just for a swim.
Up with rage, let me sing to old age before I'm done.
Cornelia was still the nicest village to stay in my humble opinion, and I loved watching the sunset from this incredible viewpoint on our last night in Cinque Terre.
And that fate won't ever stop me.
Back down the steep steps, we were soon on our next series of trains towards Venice. Venice itself is actually an island, but we were staying on the mainland called Venice Mestre, and would then commute in each day across the bridge on the train into Venice. Our hostel kind of felt like this hipster hostel version of Premier Inn, and the vibe was kind of weird as we managed to be there on the only 3 days per week with no evening hostel events. Anyway, the main attraction was of course Venice, which was so stunning and so cool to walk around all these zigzagging little streets. Here are a couple of tips for seeing Venice on a budget. For an incredible free view of Venice, book onto a free 15-minute slot on the top floor of the shopping centre Fondaco dei Tedeschi. And if you don't fancy paying an extortionate amount for a gondola ride, just pay €2 for one of the traghetti gondolas that ferry passengers from one side of the Grand Canal to the other. I did visit an art museum of Venetian art, but all the paintings looked the same after a while. I much preferred the small church converted into a museum, with information about Vivaldi's life and lots of musical instruments. Let's stop for a moment to acknowledge my newfound love of Aperol Spritz, a drink made of Prosecco, Aperol aperitif bitters, and soda water, which I'd never heard of before arriving in Italy. I was on a mission to drink at least one at each of our stops around Italy, but I particularly enjoyed the one in the home region of Aperol in Venice, while overlooking a lovely area called Campo Santa Margherita. Right, back on with the sightseeing. I was feeling adventurous, so I tried some of the local dishes for lunch, including this black pasta. But trying calamari for the first time was a bad idea, as I felt pretty sick afterwards. But seeing a polar bear made me feel better, as well as this ice cream. With nightfall came the end of our time in Venice, and we were soon on our journey towards the Italian lakes.
I'm too young to die, and that fate will never stop me from trying.